The letter arrived on a Tuesday, landing like a grenade in my perfectly organized life. I almost missed it among the usual stack of bills and junk mail, but my mother's distinctive handwriting caught my eye. After 15 years of silence, seeing her elegant script made my hands shake. My name's Tamsin, though most people call me Tammy, and I hadn't heard from my mother since I left home at 18. Now, sitting in my modern apartment overlooking downtown Seattle, that single envelope threatened to unravel everything I'd built. "You're going to burn a hole through it if you keep staring," my fiancé Nolan said, placing a cup of coffee beside me. His presence usually calmed me, but not today. "She wants something," I muttered, finally sliding my finger under the flap. She always wants something. The paper inside was expensive, typical Celine Hayes, and smelled faintly of her signature perfume. But it was the contents that made my coffee go cold, forgotten. "Dearest Tamsin, there are things you need to know about your father's death. Things I've protected you from. Come home. Your sister needs you too." "Mother." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Protected me? That's rich coming from her." Nolan leaned against the counter, concern etched on his face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking she's lying. Again." I crumpled the letter, then smoothed it out again. But you want to know what she's hiding," he finished. The truth was, I'd spent years building walls between myself and my past. I had a good job as an economist, a loving fiancé, and a life that didn't include my mother's manipulation or my half-sister Imogen's blind devotion to her. But that one letter had found a crack in my armor. My father's death had never made sense to me. "If I go back, she wins," I said, more to myself than Nolan. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Maybe. Or maybe you finally get answers." I stared at the letter again, my mother's words swimming before my eyes. Whatever game she was playing, she'd chosen her bait well. Because despite everything, despite all my promises to never let her back into my life, I knew I was going home. God help me, I was walking right back into her web. The Hayes mansion loomed before me, its pristine white columns and manicured gardens a perfect reflection of my mother's obsession with appearances. Nolan squeezed my hand as we pulled into the circular driveway, but I barely felt it. My attention was fixed on the figure standing in the doorway, Celine Hayes in all her glory, looking exactly as I remembered. "Darling." She glided down the steps, arms outstretched. Her embrace felt like being wrapped in expensive silk and thorns. "You look, well." The slight pause spoke volumes. Before I could respond, a squeal pierced the air. "Tammy." Imogen bounded out, all teenage energy and designer clothes. She threw herself at me, and for a moment, I remembered the little sister I'd left behind. Then I caught my mother's satisfied smirk. "Imogen, darling, help Tamsin with her bags. The blue guest room is ready." My mother's voice carried that familiar musical lilt that always preceded her worst manipulations. "Blue guest room?" I kept my voice steady. "Not my old room?" "Oh, we converted that into Imogen's study space years ago. She needs it for her pre-law coursework." Celine's smile never wavered. "I'm sure you understand." "Of course." My childhood erased just like that. Garrett appeared in the doorway, his kind face a welcome sight. He hugged me warmly, whispering, "Glad you're home, kiddo." At least someone was. Inside, everything was different yet exactly the same. New furniture, new art, but the same suffocating perfection. Family photos lined the walls, mostly of Imogen's achievements. I spotted only one of me, tucked away in a corner, from before I'd left. "Your father's study is exactly as he left it," Celine announced over afternoon tea, watching me carefully. "I thought you might want to look around." The invitation felt loaded, like a trap waiting to spring. Beside her, Imogen shifted uncomfortably, and I caught a flash of something in her eyes. Fear? Warning? "How thoughtful," I replied, matching her tone. "I'm sure there's plenty to discover in there." Celine's teacup clinked sharply against its saucer. "Yes, well, some things are better left in the past, wouldn't you agree?" But I'd seen it, that split-second crack in her perfect facade. Whatever she was hiding, it was in that study. And suddenly I knew why she'd invited me home. She wanted to watch me find it. Game on, mother. I waited until 2 a.m. to slip into my father's study. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco, preserved like a museum exhibit. My phone's flashlight caught the gleam of leather-bound books and the heavy oak desk where he used to work late into the night. Looking for something specific? I nearly dropped my phone. Garrett stood in the doorway, still in his day clothes. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. Couldn't sleep? I asked, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered. Your mother's been acting strange since you arrived. He moved to the desk, running his fingers along its edge. She spent hours in here last week, going through everything. Did she find what she was looking for?
No.
He pulled open the bottom drawer, reached underneath, and retrieved a small leather journal. Because I got here first. My hands trembled as I took it. Dad's diary? Your mother doesn't know I found it. There's things in there you need to see, Tammy. About the accident. The accident that killed my father had always felt wrong. A car crash on a clear night, on a road he'd driven hundreds of times. I opened the journal to a dog-eared page. My father's familiar scrawl filled the margins. Celine threatening to expose everything. Can't let her destroy the company. Meeting tonight to end this. The entry was dated the day he died. A floorboard creaked outside. Garrett and I froze. Tamsin? Imogen's whisper carried through the door. Mom's awake. She's coming down. Garrett took the diary, sliding it into my hands.
Go.
I'll handle your mother. I slipped out the side door just as Celine's voice echoed down the hallway. Garrett, what are you doing in there? Just getting some work done, dear. Couldn't sleep. Safe in my room, I read through the diary until sunrise. Each page revealed more of my mother's machinations, blackmail, affairs, corporate espionage. But the final entry chilled me to the bone. If anything happens to me, tell Tamsin the truth. The company's real books are in the offshore account. Celine knows what she did. My father's last words weren't just a warning. They were a weapon. And now I finally had what I needed to expose my mother's lies. But as the sun rose, one question haunted me. Had my mother killed my father to keep her secrets? I found Nolan in the garden, pacing between my mother's prized roses. After showing him the diary, he'd gone quiet, the kind of quiet that meant he was trying to find the right words. You need to take this to the police, he finally said. It's not that simple. I touched the diary in my pocket. If I'm right about what happened to Dad, then your mother belongs in prison. His voice was gentle but firm. A laugh interrupted us, Imogen and Celine having breakfast on the terrace. The sight of them made my stomach turn. My sister had no idea she was sitting with a potential murderer. Tammy? Imogen called out. Join us for breakfast. Before I could answer, Celine's voice cut through the morning air. Actually, darling, I need to discuss something with your sister. Alone. Imogen's face fell, but she obediently retreated inside. Nolan squeezed my hand and followed. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. My mother linked her arm through mine, her grip like steel. I understand Garrett's been helping you. Explore the house. My pulse quickened. He's been kind. Kindness. She smiled, all teeth. Such a lovely word for betrayal. We stopped by the koi pond, where she used to read to me as a child. Your father had such grand ideas about justice, about right and wrong. Look where that got him. The threat hung in the air between us. What did you do to him? The words escaped before I could stop them. She turned to me, her eyes cold. The same thing I'll do to anyone who threatens this family. Including you, darling. Is that what happened? Dad threatened the family. He threatened everything I built. Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate underneath. Sometimes we must make impossible choices to protect those we love. Like Imogen? I watched her flinch. Does she know what you did to protect her inheritance? Be very careful, Tamsin. She gripped my arm harder. Some secrets are better left buried. For everyone's sake. As she walked away, I noticed Garrett watching from his study window. He gave me a slight nod, and I knew we had to move faster than planned. Because my mother wasn't just hiding the truth anymore. She was ready to bury it again. Permanently. Garrett's study felt like a war room as we laid out our plan. The annual Hayes Family Charity Gala was tomorrow night, the perfect stage for exposures and accusations. But something in Garrett's expression made me pause. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked. He pulled out a stack of financial documents. "I've been tracking the company accounts. Large sums of money, moving right before your father's death. And again last week." "She's preparing for something," I said, scanning the numbers. My economics background made the pattern clear. Someone was liquidating assets fast. A soft knock interrupted us. Imogen slipped in, closing the door quietly. "Mom's making arrangements to send me to Europe next week. She says it's for school, but..." She hugged herself, looking younger than her 19 years. "I found this in her office." She handed me a folder. Inside were passport documents, not just for her, but for my mother too. Different names, different identities. "She's planning to run," I breathed. "With my trust fund," Imogen added, her voice breaking. Everything Dad left for me. The pieces clicked together. The charity gala wasn't just a social event, it was a farewell party. One last show of respectability before vanishing with millions. My phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. "Police contact called back. Need evidence of financial fraud before they can move." "The gala's our only chance," Garrett said, reading over my shoulder. "All the board members will be there. If we can prove the fraud, we'll need access to her private files," I said. "They're in her office. I can help." Imogen straightened up. "She trusts me. I can distract her while you..."
No.
The word came out sharper than intended. "It's too dangerous. If she suspects anything..." "She's my mother too," Imogen shot back. "And I want to know the truth about Dad as much as you do." A noise in the hallway made us freeze. Footsteps approached, then passed. "Tomorrow night," I decided, looking at my sister's determined face. "But if anything feels wrong, you get out. Promise me." She nodded, but I saw the same steel in her eyes that I felt in my heart. We were done being our mother's pawns. The game would end tomorrow night, one way or another. The gala sparkled with false promises and champagne bubbles. I watched my mother work the room, every inch the gracious hostess, while Imogen positioned herself near the office door as planned. Nolan stood by the bar, ready to create a distraction if needed. Everything was in place. So, why did my hand shake? "Ladies and gentlemen," Celine's voice carried across the ballroom. "Before we begin tonight's fundraising, I have a special announcement."
This wasn't part of the plan.
My daughter Imogen will be continuing her studies in Europe, following in her father's footsteps. She beckoned Imogen forward. "And I'll be accompanying her, stepping down as CEO to focus on family." The room erupted in polite applause. But I saw the panic in Imogen's eyes. Mother was accelerating her timeline. "We leave tomorrow morning." My heart stopped. Tomorrow? We were out of time. I slipped toward the office, but Garrett caught my arm. "Security's watching," he whispered. "She knew we were coming. Tamsin, darling." My mother materialized beside us, her smile razor-sharp. "A word in private?" In her office, she locked the door and drew the curtains. "Looking for these?" She held up my father's diary and the financial documents. "Garrett really should be more careful with his files." "You're stealing Imogen's inheritance," I said. "Just like you stole mine. I protected you both. Your father would have destroyed everything with his misguided ethics." She tossed the documents into the fireplace. "Like father, like daughter. You killed him. He killed himself, driving so recklessly that night, after I showed him what his whistleblowing would do to his precious daughters." She stepped closer. "Don't make me protect this family from you too." The door burst open. Imogen stood there, phone raised, recording. Her face was wet with tears.
Imogen, cellene started.
But Imogen backed away, shaking her head. "I heard everything. You murdered Dad." She turned and ran. Celine moved to follow, but I blocked her path. "Get out of my way," she hissed. "Or what? You'll arrange another accident." Her hand connected with my face, hard enough to send me stumbling. As I fell, I heard her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway after Imogen. and I realized with horror that I'd just sent my little sister running straight into the dark with a murderer. I found them in the garden, by the same koi pond where my mother had threatened me days before. Imogen backed away as Celine advanced, her phone still recording. "Delete it," Celine demanded, her composure cracking.
Now.
"I already sent it." Imogen's voice shook, but she stood her ground. "To everyone. The board, the police, everyone." I moved closer, catching Imogen's eye. She gave a slight nod. She was lying about sending it, but Mother didn't know that. "You ungrateful little." Celine lunged for the phone. Imogen stumbled backward, too close to the pond's edge. I saw what would happen before it did, just like that night with Dad, when Mother's actions would have unintended consequences. I sprinted forward as Imogen lost her balance, grabbed her arm,
Pulled.
we both fell away from the water, landing hard on the grass. "Always the hero, Tamsin." Mother's voice was ice. "Just like your father. Always trying to save everyone but destroying everything instead." "No." Imogen stood, helping me up. "You're the destroyer. You took Dad from us. You tried to steal my future. And for what?" "For you. Everything I did was to protect you both. By killing Dad, I stepped forward. By stealing our inheritances, by lying to everyone. Your father was weak. He would have thrown everything away for his precious morals." She reached for Imogen again. "I won't let you make the same mistake. Don't touch her." My voice didn't shake anymore. "It's over, Mother. The police are already here." On cue, blue lights flickered through the garden. Nolan had come through. Celine's mask finally shattered. "You think you've won? You're nothing without me. Both of you. Nothing." "No," Imogen said quietly. "We're free." She held out her phone, still recording. Mother's confession was captured in perfect clarity. As the police led her away, she turned back once. "I did love you, both of you. Everything I did was for yourself," I finished. "Always was." Imogen's hand found mine in the darkness. We watched in silence as our mother disappeared into the police car, taking her secrets and lies with her. But not her power. Never again her power. 6 months later, I stood in my father's study, boxing up the last of his belongings. The house had sold quickly once the scandal broke. No one wanted the mansion where Celine Hayes had orchestrated her husband's death and nearly destroyed her daughters. "Found something." Imogen called from behind the desk. She held up a photo I'd never seen. Dad with both of us at the beach, his smile genuine, unguarded. "Before everything fell apart. He would have been proud of you," I said. "Getting into art school, following your dreams. Of both of us." She tucked the photo into her pocket. "Have you read Mom's letter yet?" I touched the unopened envelope in my jacket. It had arrived yesterday from the prison, her elegant handwriting unchanged. "Not sure I want to." "Whatever it says won't change anything," Garrett said from the doorway. He'd stayed on as company CEO, working to rebuild what Celine had nearly destroyed. "You both made your own paths." Speaking of paths, Nolan appeared behind him, grinning. "We're going to be late for the wedding venue appointment." I grabbed the last box, but paused at my father's desk. The wood still held the warmth of summer sunlight, like it had that day I'd found his diary. I pulled out the letter. "You don't have to," Imogen said softly. "I know." I broke the seal and read aloud. "My dearest daughters, I never told you why I did it all. I was terrified of ending up like my own mother, penniless, powerless, abandoned. I thought I was protecting you from that fate. Instead, I became what I feared most. I lost everything that mattered trying to keep what didn't."
I'm sorry.
"Mother." Silence filled the study. Then Imogen took my hand, just like that night in the garden. "Ready?" she asked. I left the letter on the desk, next to that old photo of us at the beach. Some things were better left in the past, where they belonged. "Ready," I said, and stepped into the sunlight with my real family, the one we'd chosen, not the one we'd feared. Behind us, the study door closed on its own, gentle as a goodbye.